There is a sound in space that most people have never heard, and once you hear it, you will never forget it. Because it is not music, it is not silence. It is not the gentle hum of a distant star. It is a scream, a raw, deep, alien scream that travels across millions of kilometers of empty darkness and arrives at your ears like something ancient and furious, demanding to be taken seriously. And that sound belongs to Saturn, the planet we have spent centuries calling the jewel of the solar system. The golden beauty floating peacefully in the dark, like a painting hung in the middle of the universe for our quiet admiration. But here's the part that nobody ever talks about. Saturn is not peaceful. Saturn has never been peaceful. Saturn is one of the most violent, chaotic, terrifying places in the entire solar system. And everything we thought we knew about it, every gentle image, every poetic description, every romantic glance through a backyard telescope, was a trap, a beautifully constructed lie wrapped in rings of light and golden cloud. And the moment you look closer, the moment you actually understand what is happening on that planet, the whole illusion shatters, and what is left behind is something so strange and so powerful that it makes you feel genuinely small in a way that nothing else quite manages to do. So let us start at the very beginning with the thing everyone sees first, the thing that makes Saturn instantly recognizable from anywhere in the solar system, the rings. Those smooth, glowing, perfectly symmetrical bands of light that look from Earth like someone reached out and placed a halo around a golden planet with the gentle precision of an artist. They look solid, they look calm, they look almost decorative, like Saturn put them on for special occasions and simply never took them off. And what happened next will completely change the way you see this. Because if you were to actually fly into those rings, if you were to slip between them and move through that glowing band of light, you would not find yourself drifting through something peaceful or beautiful or serene. You would find yourself inside a grinder. A grinder made of ice and rock, where fragments ranging from the size of a single grain of sand all the way up to the size of an actual mountain are hurtling around the planet at thousands of kilometers per hour, constantly smashing into each other, shattering, spinning, reforming, and smashing again in an endless, furious, grinding cycle that has been going on for a very, very long time. And the scale of it is almost impossible to process, because these rings stretch nearly 300,000 kilometers wide, which means if you place them next to Earth, they would reach most of the way from our planet to the Moon. And yet, for all that extraordinary width, in some places, those rings are only 10 meters thick. 10 meters. That is thinner than many buildings are tall. That is a blade. A razor-thin blade of ice and rock slicing through the darkness of space in near-perfect silence. And the fact that it looks like jewelry from a distance is one of the greatest optical illusions in the known universe. But where did this violence come from, and why are the rings even there in the first place? Because they did not always exist, and they will not always exist. And the story of how they appeared is one of the saddest, most brutal stories in the entire history of our solar system. The prevailing theory, the one supported by the best science we have, is that the rings are the remains of a murder. Long ago, in a time before humans existed, before the dinosaurs. Before the earliest single-celled life was crawling through the oceans of a young Earth, a moon wandered too close to Saturn. It may have been as large as Titan, Saturn's biggest moon, a world unto itself, a place with its own geology and its own chemistry, and its own slow, ancient processes quietly unfolding across millions of years. But it got too close. It's crossed what scientists call the Roche limit, the point of no return. The invisible line in space beyond which Saturn's gravity becomes so overwhelming, so mercilessly powerful that it does not simply pull things toward it, but tears them apart, ripping the outer layers away from the core, shredding rock and ice, from ice until there is nothing left but fragments. Trillions upon trillions of frozen fragments spiraling outward into a ring, a beautiful, glowing ring of destruction that we look up at and call one of the most stunning sights in the solar system. You would think the story ends there, but it does not even close. Because the strangeness of Saturn does not stop at the rings. It does not stop at the surface. It goes deeper, literally and figuratively. And one of the strangest things you will ever see in nature is sitting right now at the North Pole of Saturn, spinning slowly and patiently, waiting for someone to notice it. And when scientists first saw it, many of them refused to believe what they were looking at. Because nature, as a general rule, does not make straight lines. Fluid dynamics, the science of how gases and liquids move and swirl and organize themselves, should produce circles, should produce spirals, should produce the kind of smooth curves you see in hurricanes and whirlpools and the arms of galaxies. And yet, at the North Pole of Saturn, there is a hexagon, a perfect six-sided geometric shape. A storm so enormous it could swallow for entire Earths inside its boundaries. A hurricane with walls that reach hundreds of kilometers deep into the planet's atmosphere. Spinning with a regularity and a precision that feels almost mechanical, almost deliberate, as if something built it and set it going and walked away. At the very center of this hexagon, there is a vortex, a massive spinning eye that scientists have described as looking like a rose made of hurricanes. A deep red, swirling maw that has been raging for decades and possibly for centuries, staring up into the void from the top of the planet like a great unblinking eye that has seen everything and forgotten nothing. But here's the part that nobody ever talks about. Saturn does not just maintain this quiet, permanent, eerie geometry at its pole. Sometimes Saturn gets angry in a much bigger, much louder, much more spectacular way. And when it does, the entire planet transforms. Every 30 Earth years, which works out to roughly one full Saturnian year, a storm wakes up inside the planet that scientists call the Great White Spot. And the name does not do it justice, because what actually happens is that a storm system so enormous, so powerful, so ferociously energetic, erupts through the cloud layers and wraps itself around the entire circumference of the planet, turning that familiar golden beauty into something pale and ghostly and terrifying. The lightning inside this storm flashes 10,000 times more powerfully than anything that has ever struck the Earth. It churns white clouds of ammonia ice up from deep within the interior of the planet and smears them across the golden bands like paint being dragged through paint. And for a time, Saturn does not look like Saturn anymore. It looks like something that has been broken open from the inside. Something that could not keep its own violence contained and finally let it out. And then slowly, over months, it settles back into its familiar patterns. The gold returns, the calm appears to return, and the whole thing looks peaceful again. Which is exactly the trap, exactly the beautiful lie, starting over from the beginning. And what happened next will completely change the way you see this. Because the violence and the strangeness of Saturn is not limited to the planet itself. Saturn has more than 140 moons, an entire population of worlds orbiting the central giant, each one different, each one with its own secrets. And two of them in particular are so bizarre, so unexpected, so genuinely difficult to believe, that they deserve their own stories told slowly and carefully, so that the full weight of them has time to land. The first is Titan. Titan is the largest of Saturn's moons and the second largest moon in the entire solar system. And from a distance, it looks almost ordinary, just a large spherical body wrapped in a thick orange haze. But Titan is the only moon in the solar system that has a thick atmosphere, a real atmosphere. One with a surface pressure higher than the atmospheric pressure on Earth, which means if you stood on Titan, you would not need a pressurized suit to keep your body from exploding outward, though you would absolutely need one to breathe. Because the atmosphere is mostly nitrogen with traces of methane and other hydrocarbons, and none of it is oxygen. But here is the truly disorienting part. If you looked around on Titan, you would see rivers. You would see lakes. You would see rain clouds hanging heavy and dark in the orange sky. You would see dunes and valleys and shorelines, and for a brief, surreal moment, it would look like home. it would look like Earth. And that feeling, that moment of recognition, is exactly where Titan becomes terrifying, because none of it is what it looks like. The rain is not water. The rain is liquid methane and ethane, liquid natural gas falling from the sky in slow, graceful drops, because the gravity on Titan is so much lower than on Earth that everything moves with a strange, dreamlike slowness. The temperature on the surface is around -179 degrees Celsius. If you reached down and touched a lake on Titan with an unprotected hand, it would not freeze you the way cold water freezes. It would do something far worse. It would cool your tissues so rapidly, so violently, that they would become rigid and brittle in seconds. And if you jumped into one of those lakes, you would not sink and drown and slowly freeze. You would shatter like glass dropped on a stone floor. Because at that temperature, organic material does not bend, it does not give, it simply breaks. And the ground beneath your feet would not be sand. The massive dunes of Titan are made of dark hydrocarbon grains, essentially tiny particles of plastic, electrostatically charged and shifting in the alien wind, piling up into dunes hundreds of meters high that stretch for hundreds of kilometers across the landscape. And the whole place is built from the raw materials of chemistry rather than geology. A world that looks like life, but is made of the ingredients of something else entirely. But here's the part that nobody ever talks about. As strange and as fascinating as Titan is, the moon that might actually matter most, the moon that might one day change our understanding of our place in the universe, is much smaller, much quieter, and much less immediately dramatic. It is a tiny bright ball called Enceladus, and for years after we first observed it, we thought it was simply a frozen rock, a cold, dead, unremarkable chunk of ice drifting in Saturn's shadow. Worth cataloging, but not worth lingering over. The kind of moon you note in a database and move past on your way to something more interesting. And then we saw the tiger stripes. Long, blue, parallel fractures cutting across the south pole of Enceladus, cracking the bright white surface open like wounds. And from these cracks, from these frozen scars, the moon was bleeding, not slowly, not gently, not in the quiet way ice sometimes sublimates at the edge of a comet. Enceladus was erupting. Giant geysers of water, vapor, and ice were shooting hundreds of kilometers up into space at supersonic speeds, spraying outward in great plumes that spread across the darkness and feed one of Saturn's rings with fresh material. Saturn's gravity is constantly kneading and flexing the interior of Enceladus the way you might work dough in your hands. And that constant squeezing generates heat deep inside the moon, enough heat to melt the ice, enough heat to maintain a global ocean of liquid water beneath the frozen shell. And that ocean is not empty, it is not sterile, it is not just water. It has salt in it. It has heat rising from the ocean floor in hydrothermal vents. It has organic molecules, the basic chemical building blocks that on Earth eventually arrange themselves into the first living things. And you need to sit with that for a moment, because what it means is that beneath the frozen surface of a tiny moon orbiting a violent gas giant hundreds of millions of kilometers from Earth, there is a warm, dark, pressurized ocean with salt and heat and organic chemistry. The exact conditions that scientists believe gave rise to life on our own planet. And something we have not yet found but cannot rule out, might be swimming in it. We went to Saturn looking for data. We went looking for measurements and photographs and gravitational readings and atmospheric samples. And we might, if we look carefully enough and go back soon enough, find that we are not alone in the solar system. You would think the story ends there, but it does not even close. Because to collect the information that led us to these discoveries, to send back the images and the data that changed our understanding of Saturn and its moons, a machine had to die. The Cassini spacecraft spent 13 years at Saturn, a loyal and tireless explorer orbiting the planet and its moons hundreds of times, passing through the rings, dipping into the upper atmosphere, swinging close to Titan and Enceladus and dozens of other moons, and sending everything it found back to Earth. in a stream of data that scientists are still analyzing today. But by 2017, Cassini was running out of fuel, and the mission controllers at NASA faced a problem. Because a drifting, powerless spacecraft could eventually crash into Enceladus or Titan, and if it carried any earthly microbes, any biological hitchhikers that had survived the journey from our contaminated planet, it could introduce them to those pristine alien oceans and make it impossible to ever know whether any life we found there was actually native or whether we had brought it ourselves. So they made a decision. They ordered Cassini to fly directly into Saturn. On its final orbit, the spacecraft dove into the atmosphere of the planet it had spent 13 years studying. And it fought. It held its antenna pointed at Earth for as long as it physically could, transmitting data until the last possible second, sending back information about the upper atmosphere as it began to heat and shake and break apart around it. And then the pressure and the heat became too great, and Cassini, piece by piece, melted and vaporized and scattered into the planet it had loved from a distance for over a decade, and it became part of Saturn forever, dissolved into the atmosphere of the Lord of Chaos. Which feels like the right ending for a machine that gave everything it had to help us understand a place that gives nothing back. And here is the final, quiet truth that makes everything else feel both smaller and larger at the same time. Saturn is dying. Not quickly, not dramatically, not in the way a star dies in a flash of light visible across the galaxy, but slowly and steadily and inevitably. Gravity is pulling the rings downward into the planet in a process called ring rain, a slow, continuous drizzle of material falling from the rings into Saturn's atmosphere. And scientists estimate that within 100 million years, which sounds like a vast and incomprehensible amount of time, but is actually a blink in the life of a solar system, the rings will be completely gone. Saturn will still exist, still spinning, still storming, still screaming its radio frequencies into the void. But it will look like every other gas giant, just another featureless ball of hydrogen and helium floating in the dark without its crown, without its halo, without the thing that made it unmistakable. So look at it now. Look at it while the rings are still there, while the hexagon is still spinning, while Enceladus is still bleeding its plumes of water into space, while Titan's methane rain is still falling in slow motion onto its plastic dunes, while the whole impossible system is still turning and churning and screaming and glowing. Because it is temporary, because the most beautiful things always are. Because Saturn spent 4.5 billion years building something that will be gone in a cosmic instant, and the fact that we exist at exactly the right moment in history to see it, to study it, to send machines to it and have them send us back the sound of it, is either the greatest luck in the story of our species or the most precise and deliberate gift the universe has ever given us. And either way, it is something you should never, ever take for granted.